Welcome to episode 6 of Outtakes. I am Dr. Elizabeth Plummer, and I am here with my colleague to talk all about emerging technologies in English language education. We had the opportunity to build a course together on this topic, and just due to the constraints of when you build a course, not everything got to be put in the course. And so we've been doing these outtakes to kind of talk about some of these things that didn't make it into the course, but also expand on ideas that are in the course and on things that have happened since we finished building the modules. And so I think one of my favorite things about this project and about building this course for English language programs was the collegiality of it. Especially when we got to the facilitated. I mean, not that I don't enjoy talking to you, obviously, because we keep doing these sessions, but when we got to the live sessions where they were going and the discussions were going and the discussion boards and people were exploring the topics, it was so energizing for me to see the depth of which individuals were thinking about ideas that we were presenting for them. And what about you, Jeff?
Yeah, I think, it's the same thing. I think it's just getting a chance to jump in the discussion boards. I have been kind of away from the community aspect of foreign language teaching and second language teaching lately. So just being able to jump back in and see people I haven't seen in forever, and then just running into new people in those discussion boards where I don't know them, but we have such similar ideas on certain topics, and being able to kind of riff and brainstorm with them was super fun. Just again, getting back in the community felt really good.
Yeah. Yeah. So today we're talking all about communities and learner training. So for our first question, we have how important is it to provide learner training on using technology? I know if you asked Phil Hubbard this question, he would say it's super, super important.
I think it's something we did talk about in the videos quite a bit, so I don't want to belabor it. But that whole thing of I would say don't stereotype your students because of technology. That thing of like, oh, they're digital natives. Just because they can, flip through the apps on their phone very quickly doesn't mean they can navigate a course management system very effectively, right? So I think one of those things it kind of got hit upon in the videos and in the discussion boards a little bit, but I think what separates out that, for lack of a better term right now, digital native and digital immigrant mentality is a willingness to play with technology. And a lot of, this is how kids learn technology, just play with stuff and figure out how it works. Whereas adults were, playing is graded out of us, I like to say. We start to become really fear adverse because of the high stakes of grading in education. So I think, it's really important to get them trained up on this because they may not know it. And I also think taking a more of a playful approach to discovering how these tools work is also super important. For you, I think students can introduce you to technologies as well, but you got to be willing to play with them a little bit.
Yeah, that I think one of the fears that I see, which didn't make it in the course, is that teachers think that they have to know everything about a technology before they
Right.
introduce it to their students. And that's the idea that I really want us to question as teachers, right? Like you have to have a knowledge of it, but also um, maybe you don't. Like sometimes a student will say, like CapCut, which is a video editing software. Um, I had students who were saying, yeah, we're using this to make videos. And I said, oh, can you show me what you're doing? And then as a language facilitator, right, helped them sort of transition their personal use into how they could use it for their language learning, right? Because I am an expert in language learning. And so learner training is really important, and learner training takes all sorts of different forms, right? And sometimes, as you're building sort of your learner training, you shift who does different components of the training. And so I introduced in the course videos using the gradual release of responsibility model. And one of the things that I really wanted to say that didn't make it in there is that the I do part of the instruction where I as a teacher do it, maybe that I do is a student gets up and does it,
Right. There you
right?
go.
I think, we can really start to redefine who's doing the training and at what stage.
Yeah,
Um,
and that gradual release of responsibility got a lot of traction on the discussion boards. Like people really gravitated towards that, and focused quite a bit on it. And I think it's a great approach to using technology. But you have a very, excellent point there. Maybe it's the student who gets up, right?
Yeah, yeah. Well, and one of the things I really like about using that model is that it helps you as a teacher to sort of not be as afraid because you have a set sort of framework for how you can um, incorporate learner training. Like you don't have to know everything. You're building a lesson using this framework. And so I think using that model can really help teachers in exploring technologies and in feeling comfortable introducing them to their students. But let's move on to our second question, which is what emerging technologies are you currently using in your teaching? Um, I would love to share some of the things that I'm
Yeah,
using.
let's go.
So I teach online, primarily online, and so something that I'm using administratively to help me is called Text Blaze. And what it does is that it allows you to create shortcuts for common feedback that you provide, common, pieces of language that you provide. So I provide a lot of similar feedback to students. And so I can have TextBlade running in the background, and as I'm giving feedback to students, I can just use shortcuts, and it brings up that narrative. And that narrative was written at a time when I wasn't annoyed with seeing the same thing for the 30th time. So it has a lot more pleasant voice to it. And so I really like that. And then in teaching my doctoral students, I use citation managers, and I personally use Zotero as a citation manager. So I'm using that, which is a, a kind of emerging technology. I don't know if it's emerging. I mean, I've been using it for a long time, but
More
I
people
think
need to know about it.
I think for a lot of people it's emerging because they haven't spent a lot of time with citation managers. And then I also have been using in teaching language, and I've been using Copilot as the AI that I primarily use with my students for a couple of reasons. First is we're a Microsoft school, and Copilot, they have access to it from their account. But also, I want the simplicity of just having one Gen AI that we use in our classrooms in the midst of all the other technologies we're using, just to keep it simple. And so, protecting the privacy, keeping it down to one, and that's where we are. What about you?
Yeah, I'm using a lot of different things all over. I kind of keep it super simple, but with using technology, there's one I really like. It's a piece of actual physical hardware called a Stream Deck, and it's basically just a little box with a bunch of LED buttons that you can program for shortcuts and things. So teaching online, doing a lot of Zoom calls and things like that, it's really great. So instead of like hovering across my screen with a mouse and clicking things, I can just look down, push a button, and it launches a whiteboard. It launches, my note taking. It launches my, cameras and microphones. So for me, it's like organizationally, it really is helping me kind of navigate a digitally mediated classroom, especially if I'm doing something like a hybrid or a high flex classroom where people are all over the place physically and online. Having that where I can just quickly look down and hit buttons without having to like go across my multiple screens and monitors. So that's been really a good one I like a lot. And the other one, and I'll always go back because I never miss a chance to talk about, is games. Using a lot of video games in my classroom. Again, just to give students, you know, games are really great at running simulations or giving students problems to solve. And in that problem solving is communication and getting students to kind of like talk and interact and work together. I keep thinking about this of what technology can I use to give my students something to talk about, And for me, it's always been a lot, a lot of games. There's a great community of practice since we talk about, or a professional, learning network called Ludic Language Pedagogy by a couple of teachers and language teachers and researchers over in Japan. Jonathan Dehaan and James York are the leads there. Great one to check out if you're interested in using games as a way to get your students communicating in the classroom. So really like that. Been using those quite a bit too. So
Yes. I've been using like LinkedIn a lot for connecting with other educators who are using emerging technologies. I think one of the things that that's kind of happening right now is that AI is overtaking conversations in education, and we're forgetting about these other technologies that are really important and really impactful and maybe are a better choice, a better option for our classrooms.
yeah, and it's something where, I've been trying to sort my thoughts out on this lately, but I think one of the problems with technology today is, we're in an attention economy. And so all of the different tools want your attention. And so there's another set of notifications and another set of alerts coming in. And so I think for me, in working with my students on this and really helping them trying to understand that like these tools aren't helpful, right? They're all trying to take your time. So starting to meaningfully like, let's cut down on that. Let's eliminate that. Let's reduce that. And really trying to streamline my technology choices in my classroom to eliminate as many distractions as possible. And so that's, like I mentioned, hard physical buttons I can push and it just works. So trying to find technology too that's less demanding of my attention and less demanding of my students' attention has been really a focus of me lately. And for better or for worse is my thoughts on AI are all over the place, but at least right now that software doesn't inundate you with like social notifications or someone commented this or someone did that. It is one on one, and I really do kind of like that.
Yeah, I mean, there are some things that have been introduced in the past couple of months, maybe sooner than that, where you can do collaborative work, where you introduce Gen AI into your collaborative sphere and share with other individuals. But I don't know if that's as widespread used. I don't think it's necessarily as widespread used as that one-on-one. I think is a lot more as people are exploring it. I want people to not have a fear that they're missing out and that they're behind. And so, I mean, the technologies that I showed and highlighted, I mean, they're not necessarily, Zotero is not necessarily a new technology. And if you're just being introduced to a citation manager and looking at it, that's super fantastic. And you shouldn't feel behind the game because that's what these companies want. They want you to feel that way because they want to make money. They want to trap you into the latest and greatest. And I think announcements that continue to come out regularly by these tech companies really highlight that. They're trying to keep users, they're trying to get more users, they want to make more money.
There's something about the natural adoption too of like a technology will work for you when you're ready for it to work for you. I think, and one thing is there's a great bit of research. There's a book out there this on social network theory, and not talking about like online social media, but just like our networks of people that we interact with. And one of the things that's overwhelmingly clear in that research was like if the people around you don't adopt that technology, you probably won't either. And so I think it's that issue of, if you go into your educational context, your classroom or your school and say, "Hey, here's this great new tool," and everyone's like, "Nah," you're probably going to abandon it. And something else I think is interesting too, and you mentioned this earlier of like your students are using a tool, and then you're like, "Oh wow, I could use it this way, and my students could use it this way." So I think another way to kind of get comfortable with the technology and find the technology that works for you is what's something your colleagues are currently using or you all could find value in, and two, what are your students using? And start there because at least there's a user base that will help you make it work.
Yes, yes. Well, and calling back to episode one, like when you're sharing these things, it's great to say, look how cool, look how great this is. But if it's not actually helping you meet learning goals or administrative tasks, that's really important. We're not just sharing just for the sake of sharing, but we're actually showing and highlighting and talking about the pedagogy behind it.
Yeah, and I think that's, think about it too from your students' perspective. I remember when I got, the cool tool approach and, Kahoot came out and Kahoot was a big thing and I was using, I was like, this is going to be fun. And my students, they looked at me like, we've used it 4 times today already, because everybody was using it, right? And I was like, oh yeah. It's like, just because it's cool, let's do something else then. It's like our students can get burnt out on this technology just as much as we can get confused or lost in it.
Yeah, I think that's a great place to end episode 6. And
Oh,
thank you so much for joining us. It's been so fantastic to continue these conversations with you, Jeff, for all of you in joining us in continuing these conversations. And we hope you are able to explore technology on your own as you decide what works in your own classroom.
for sure. Share what you're doing.